just about 8 o'clock here on a beautiful Wednesday evening here in TNT, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Indaba program here on Talk City 91.1. And what a packed program we have. We have a report from the Secretariat with Program Officer Kadija Dyer. Africa Report, of course, Ghana, the return of John Mahama as president, and of course the feature, the UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent Caribbean Regional Conference on the UN Draft Declaration on the Human Rights of People of African Descent. Of course, to tell us a little bit more about that, in fact, let me just welcome the crew, as we call them, and Shabaka Kambon, Rev Kwame Kamau, and Dr. Fergus. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening, Ruskin, and we consider you part of our team as well. You know, we always recognize whoever is in studio at 91.1 as one of our team. And I even recognize that in the Africa Report in the credits. So you are one of our team as well. Good evening to the listeners on 91.1 FM Talk City. Good evening to those tuning in on YouTube and on Facebook. Wherever you are, welcome to Indaba, another program where knowledge grows. Program of the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago. We have in studio as co-host Rev Kwame Kamau. Good evening, my brother. And we will be joined shortly by our esteemed other co-host, Shabaka Kambon. He will be with us shortly. Good evening, my brother.
Good evening to you as well, the hardest working retired professor on the planet. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Special good night to all of our loyal listeners and viewers now by way of YouTube and Facebook. Of course, to our die-hard 91.1 FM listeners. I tell you, from time to time, Dr. Fergus and Brother Shabaka, I encounter persons who can tell me they go back 10 years plus, of Indaba, since Hatchet was a hammer, and they can recall some of, your more controversial programs, and they're loyal. They're tuned in right now. Some of them haven't even joined us on the social media space yet. And of course, tonight is our grand finale. So if you want to not just hear us, but you want to see these faces and really want to capture the essence of the Africa Report with all of the pictures, the stills, and the video material, definitely you want to check us out by way of YouTube and Facebook. Again, CPAN by way of Facebook, and of course ESCTT by way of YouTube. With that said, I want to welcome my Pan-Africanist extraordinaire brother. Time flies when you're having fun. I don't know what happened to 2024, but we are at the end of the year. Much has happened. Much has been done within the Pan-African space. Really looking forward to a kind of 2024 in recap at some point in 2025. I'd love to see what Dr. Fergus would do with an Africa Report that does a kind of a roundup in terms of the best highlights for 2024, even as we weigh in ourselves as co-hosts on some of those issues, some of those featured topics. Again, pleasant good night to you, my brother. Just came off the plane. There isn't a Pan-Africanist frequent flyer like my brother. Just had to make sure he was fresh for the camera on tonight. You are looking fresh. I'm sure you have tons to tell us. Tonight we might not get that report, but hopefully in the new year when we start in January of 2025, you'll tell us all about these amazing exploits.
Well, tonight I'm in Barbados, and we're going to be joined by the chair of the Emancipation Support Committee, Sister Zakia Wadada. She's here as well. We're in two different locations. She's at the welcoming event for this conference that's going to take place tomorrow, and she and Sister Gaynel Curry, who's one of the members of the Permanent Forum, the United Nations Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. They are together at the welcoming event, and we're going to be joined by them at some point in the program to hear what's happening tonight and to talk about what's going to happen tomorrow. I unfortunately didn't make it in on time for the event. My plane ride left a little bit late and it was delayed. But I'm already in Barbados and I'm looking forward to joining all the other colleagues from around the region at the conference tomorrow. And of course, this is to further that historic agenda represented by this permanent forum for people of African descent. And just for the base, just for the sake of our listeners, when the Permanent Forum for Indigenous Affairs was launched, it energized the indigenous movement significantly, and within just a few years, you had a number of major developments that are still resounding to the betterment of people, of indigenous people of the Americas, based on that event. So based on that formulation, so I think African people have reason to be buoyed by this historic development at the United Nations, and I look forward to discussing the details with Miss Gaynel Curry and Sister Zakia.
Awesome, awesome. And with that said, of course, we want to welcome Sister Kadija Dyer from the Emancipation Support Committee to give us, the ESC Secretariat report. Greetings to you and welcome. We present to someone introduced to others this young and dynamic female that makes the ESCTT work. You are one of the very, very hardworking people behind the scenes. Tell us, what's the latest in the life and times of the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago? I know that we just came out of a number of extraordinary events, and then we are going into a new calendar as well. What's going on in the ESC world at this time? Very pleasant good night and welcome.
Hi, good night to the panel. Good night to our listeners via 91.1. Good night to our listeners on our social media and YouTube. So this weekend we have our Kwanzaa market happening at Queen's Hall Garden Theatre. The first year we had it was in 2022 at Garden Theatre. Last year we went to Queen's Park Savannah, and persons like they really enjoy it at Queen's Hall, so we are back at the Garden Theatre. What makes our market different, because there's so many markets happening leading up to the Christmas season right now.
Competition. You got a lot of
but what makes our own different is the uniqueness of our artisans. We have just under 30 vendors and persons who they came to the Emancipation Village, but it was a rush because for Emancipation time, there's so many people. Now we have this intimate space. You can walk through, take your time, sit and chat with your artisans, samples. And we don't have, so for example, Panchagram. Everyone is saying Panchagram right now, but we do not have more than 3 people selling the same item.
Right.
And that makes us unique. So we have a twist. So you're not getting just normal panchagram. You're getting sorrel panchagram, ginger based panchagram. You're getting dasheen panchagram, green fig panchagram.
Wow.
So we have a nice.
Is there something for vegans? Hint, hint. To the vendors, is it vegan friendly? On behalf of vegans everywhere.
Yes. So especially with the provision, you do not need to use eggs.
Awesome.
Yeah, and they use coconut milk instead of the dairy milk. So there's something for everyone. So I will encourage everyone to come on down on the 14th, on Saturday 14th. We start at 10 a.m. We end at 4 p.m. So you have enough time to also visit other markets. And on Sunday, we start at 9 a.m. and end at 3 p.m. Because Monday's a working day, and we finish early o'clock. So when you go to your family shop and you pass through and end early.
And now I know it's Christmas themed, Kwanzaa themed, end of year themed. So, in Trinidad and Tobago, there are a number of things that you would expect in terms of delicacies. But for those persons who are interested, whenever we talk ESC and whenever we talk about markets, they're expecting clothing, apparel, the likes of which our retired professors decked in on today. On tonight, actually. They're probably expecting some accessories as well and other things along that nature. Can we expect that kind of variety?
Yeah, so besides your traditional delicacies, the black cake that everyone says is granny black cake and granny sweetbread, you also get the majority of the products, especially home decor products, are Afrocentric. So, for example, Euclid Christopher and her family from the Ang, they do Afrocentric decor. So their curtain is Afrocentric. So you get a nice mud cut for your curtain. Your throw
Mm.
pillows have designs on it. Um, Bezel designs, be brand, they're also doing Afro. Your apron and all is Afrocentric. So you have your
Oh, yeah.
African prints on your apron as well. Your bed sheets, everything is Afrocentric, and you will also get clothing there as well, because a lot of companies are having their Christmas parties, and what better to make a statement than wearing African clothing, because immediately you stand out. You don't look like everyone. Immediately you stand out, because African clothing, they are bold pieces. They spot you from a distance. So of course you're going to be the life of the party. You're going to be that standout piece in the party.
Sounds.
So I just want a point to note as well. This is our last event for 2024. We are bringing 2024. We are closing the curtains on 2024 on Sunday, the 15th of December. So I encourage everyone to come out, bring your families, come out, support our artisans, support your ESC team. Definitely 2024 has been a resilient year for us. We continue working with Auntie, an all-female cast, and we make it happen with our little team. We make big things happen, if I don't say so myself.
You can
Um,
absolutely say so
and we
yourself. And
have
of course,
one.
congratulations to you and this all
Thank you.
star female cast as led by the Queen Mother, the legendary Queen Mother herself, who is currently, of course, in Barbados. So she's a Bajan for the next couple of days. But we love you and we love the work that you do. Parting words as you go with regards to we just came out of the Republic Bank sponsored African history quiz and spoken word competition. There was a lot of work that went into that. A lot of persons don't know the level of work that the ESC does outside of
Mhm.
the Emancipation Day and the procession and that season. In your closing remarks, what goes into creating such a televised event? From the looks of it, the excellence, the preparation of the children, certainly the material, it looks like a lot of sleepless nights to
Mhm.
make that happen. Do you make it look easier than it really is?
Yes, you do. From our dear parted brother, Uncle Tracy, he always used to say, drunk or sober, mind your business.
Mm,
And African history is our business. Even though, we still have the naysayers, African history is our business. And I believe our children have a right to know what that is. History is not just 5 years ago, 10 years ago. No, history is way before that, and we have to teach them the good and the bad. I'm listening to the students, seeing their reactions to the
mm,
booklet, that they are digesting these pieces and they come to ask questions, and you can see they become emotional from reading the material, because again, it is not offered in our school system. Their parents may or may not know, so they're not sharing information with them. The information is there, but again, they're afraid to tackle the information, because how do I dissect? This is something new for me. How do I dissect this information? With our competition, we are giving them access to that. We are teaching them, okay, this is how you approach this topic. It's and it's okay. It's okay, and you want persons to know that it's okay. That the good, the bad, always have the naysayers about it. But drunk or sober, mind your business. If in 2024 you are telling me you still don't know there's emancipation celebration every single year on August the 1st, then something is not wrong with us. Something is wrong with you.
Well,
something
strong word
definitely is
closing. I
wrong
want
with
you to give. I
you.
want you to give the listeners tonight via 91.1 FM, as well as those in YouTube land and Facebook land. Could you give them the numbers? Maybe they want their school to participate in the spoken word competition 2025. Maybe they want to participate in the history quiz. Maybe they want to be a part of the emancipation celebration for 2025. Maybe they want to be a part of this end of year, African Kwanzaa market happening from Friday to Sunday. Again, give them the days, again, give them the times, and close out with a contact number so that the people who are interested, whether in vending and or participating, they know who to call and when and how.
Okay, so you can reach us at 292-7288. Again, 292-7288. Our office line 235-5008. You can also send us a message on our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram. And they know how to find us because anything negative, they spam our pages. They come for emancipation time, they always report on our pages. So how it is for something negative in the country is happening, you can find our page. But for something positive with our young people, you can't find our page to make a comment, to congratulate them, to congratulate us for doing the said work that you say that we are not doing.
So let me be the one tonight to congratulate you, Queen Sister Kadija, as well as our very hardworking technical staff, Rene Francois behind the scenes, of course, as led by Queen Mother Zakia Uzuma Wadada herself. Special good night to Sister Rain as well, and all of you, our wonderful, hardworking staff. We love you. We see you. We recognize your words, and again, look out for those calls. I'm thinking positive. You're gonna get some new fans based on tonight's program. I promise. Thank you for dropping in. Thank you for being a part of it. Again, it's this Friday to this Sunday. What time to what time?
It's on Saturday and Sunday. So two-day
I'm
market.
corrected. This Saturday and this Sunday. What time?
Saturday the 14th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Sunday the 15th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Excellent.
Okay, so at this time we move on to the Africa report. It should take us very close to break. Now, I wasn't sure that this was going to be I wasn't sure that was going to be our final election for this year. I did intend to do one on the Sahelian Revolution, as I call it, because there's some really new, exciting developments there. But then I thought that the elections might be a little bit stale by January, if this is the final for the year. So I decided to make a switch to look at the Ghanaian elections. So, Rene, bring that up immediately, and let's have the Africa report on the Ghanaian elections, which took place last Saturday.
As a commission, we have fulfilled our vowed aspiration to imbibe transparency, accountability, inclusiveness, and responsiveness at the heart of all our operations. And I can confidently say that with the help of God, we have fulfilled these aspirations and the expectations of the citizenry. We have conducted elections that are credible, fair, transparent, and peaceful. Elections that have ensured that the will of the people, as expressed at the polls, that every vote counts.
That was Mrs. Jean Adukwe Mensah, Chair of Ghana's Electoral Commission. This week's Africa Report reviews Ghana's presidential and parliamentary elections that took place last Saturday, the 7th of December. It is evident from local, regional, continental, and other international observers that Ghana has retained its #1 position in Africa for transparent, generally peaceful, and indisputably fair elections. More than any other factor accounting for Ghana's premier status is the citizens' trust in the impartiality of the Electoral Commission. Mrs. Jean Mensah was appointed by President Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo in 2018 at the relatively young age of 46 years. Mensah succeeded Charlotte Osei, the first female chairperson, who was also appointed by Akufo-Addo. Mensah brought a new level of efficiency to the commission. Prior to the elections, she had committed to speedy delivery of results, saying, quote, "We are promoting some efficiency into the system. We are expecting that by the next day, we should be able to declare the results. We do not intend to go beyond 24 hours, end of quote. There was considerable international interest in the elections, and Mensah was keenly aware that she and her commissioners were holding in their hands Ghana's image to the world.
To all our observers from the ECOWAS, from the African Union, from the ECONEC, from the Commonwealth Secretariat, from the West Africa Elders Forum, supported by the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation, from the National Peace Council, from CODEO, from the Association of African Election Authorities, from the European Center for Election Systems, from International IDEA, from Manso Institute, IDEG, and to electoral commissioners from election management bodies in Africa, namely Uganda, Gambia, Kenya, Liberia. We say thank you for your support. We wish you all Godspeed back home.
Nigerian news channels saw Ghana's elections as their elusive dream, while Nigerians in Ghana wondered if they were on a different planet. Listen to this snippet of Ghana-based Nigerians on Sandy's Joyful Space channel.
Nigerians had a lot to say about this, especially Nigerians living in Ghana. They are shocked. We are witnessing such an election for the first time in their life.
I wake up this morning, get one of my friends, will call me for phone, na Nigerian girl. They tell me, say, babe, today na election day for Ghana. I say yes. Say, but it's too peaceful now. Saying she went outside, she saw that everywhere was just calm, no fights, nothing. I say, were you expecting people to fight before you know say today na election day? You don't even compare Nigeria to Ghana. Now when they call Ghana peaceful home, yes, peaceful home, because Ghana is the most peaceful country in the world.
Jean Mensah kept her word, or almost did. On Monday, exactly 48 hours after the close of the polls, and with 9 of the 275 constituencies still to be collated, she officially declared former one-term president John Dramani Mahama of the NDC party winner of the presidential elections with 56.5% of the vote, beating his main rival, Vice President Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia of the ruling NPP by over 1.6 million votes. Mahama's running mate, Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman, will become the first female vice president of Ghana. Akufo-Addo was hamstrung by a hung parliament in his second term. On the contrary, Mahama will benefit from his party's majority in his second term. The NDC controls 187 confirmed seats in the 275-seat National Assembly. The NPP has been reduced to 74, while there are 4 independents. Independent and impartial electoral umpires are indispensable agents in Africa's evolution of electoral democracy. In true sportsmanlike manner, Vice President Bawumia telephoned Mahama to concede even before the counting was completed and before the official announcement by Jean Mensah. The significance of this concession cannot be underrated in the politics of Ghana and most other African countries. Delaying concession or rejecting the validity of the results has had devastating consequences, as occurred in Kenya in 2010, in Nigeria since May 2023, with many still questioning the legitimacy of the regime despite the Supreme Court's endorsement, and currently unfolding in Mozambique, with ongoing street protests since the elections on October 9th. The significance of Bawumia's early concession was not lost on Mahama, who praised the NPP flag bearer in the introduction to his victory speech.
I'd like to thank the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, for his statesmanship in conceding the election long before the declaration of the results by the Electoral Commission. This concession largely diffused the tensions that are characteristic of high-stakes elections such as this.
President Akufo-Addo also delivered a congratulatory message to Mahama, thus crowning Ghana's new political culture of democracy established by President Jerry Rawlings in 1992.
I also just received a call from His Excellency the President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. He graciously extended his congratulations to me, and we had the opportunity to discuss matters related to the Joint Transitional Team. We agreed on an early inauguration of the Joint Transitional Team as early as Wednesday, the 11th of December. I conveyed my sincerest regards to him and expressed my readiness for us to work together to ensure a smooth transition in the best interest of the Ghanaian people.
Since the return to electoral democracy in 1992, no political party has ruled for more than 2 consecutive terms. But the main reason the electorate gave the NPP the red flag was mainly because of the dismal performance of the NPP in general and Akufo-Addo's leadership in particular. The economic and financial policies of the NPP regime drove the economy into a tailspin even before the COVID-19 fallout. Under Akufo-Addo, the national currency, the cedi, depreciated from 4 to 1 US dollar to 14 to 1 US dollar. The regime failed to resolve Dumsor, the term used for the endemic electrical blackouts which started under Mahama. They failed to curb galamsey, or illegal mining, which is polluting the country's rivers and destroying valuable farmlands, particularly cocoa lands. The high rate of youth unemployment rose even higher. There were numerous charges of financial corruption, the most glaring being the expenditure of $58 million on Akufo-Addo's pet project, a mega cathedral which is yet to see its foundation off the ground. Desperate for a financial bailout, the Akufo-Addo regime surrendered economic planning to the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, which worsened the social and economic conditions of the people. In the post-COVID-19 era, multiple new vexatious taxes were imposed on the people, along with a runaway inflation reaching 54% this year. As a consequence of these and more grievances, many fanatical NPP supporters and Addo worshippers in 2012 were waiting patiently on December 7th to vent their anger against the party for betraying the trust and increasing their hardship. In his campaign, Mahama had to convince the electorate to vote for him, although the maximum he could stay in office is 4 years, having already served a full term from 2013 to 2017.
4 years of a good leader will make more impact than 8 years of a dishonest leader. It's not about how long you serve. It is about how well you serve. It's not about 8 years or 4 years. It is about hard work. It is about truth. It is about trust. And it is about doing the things that will create a future for our young people.
What does the future hold for Ghana?
Now, Bawumia has admitted that Ghana needs change. Can President John Mahama coming back ensure that change, or he will be demystified? These are the issues. Because the same issues he left behind is coming to confront them. And who is he? What kind of man is he? Does he have what it takes?
That was Dr. Ruben Abati interviewing journalist Dele Momodu, a close associate of Mahama on Arise TV. Now let's hear what Mahama has to say about that.
The journey is not going to be easy, my brothers and sisters, because the outgoing government has plunged our dear nation into an abyss. We intend to work together to restore the shattered confidence in our politics and governance system. This election and its outcome represents an opportunity for a new beginning, as we can begin to write a new chapter of our collective story.
Okay, so that's your Africa report. We are going to suspend any discussion until after our next guest. Yes, so we want to welcome our next guest in the program.
Good night, Professor. Good night, Professor.
It's a question on international personality, right? And so they were supposed to talk about international personality, states, and
Greetings, Professor Curry. Can you hear us?
Greetings, Professor. We are live. We are on live, and
We are live on a line.
Yes.
I'm here in good company. I'm here in good company.
Welcome to Indaba. Welcome back, we should say. Welcome to Indaba. And, yes, so we are outnumbered by our personnel from Barbados. We have Professor Gaynel, Sister Zach, and our co-host Shabaka. So we are outnumbered by the Bajan crew this evening. Welcome, Professor. Yes.
Yes.
So,
you go ahead. I'm trying to put you in. No, I'm not going to show you. Okay. Yes, once I said
yes, we understand you have limited time, so we are going to try to maximize
some credit.
time. Yes. So how are things in Barbados, and exactly what is the conference about? How are things going to be set up tomorrow? The procedures, the protocols, and so on. Just tell us a bit about that, and I would like you, while you're going on, since we rush for time in a sense, my particular interest in the conference in terms of the Declaration of Rights of African People would be a takeoff from Marcus Garvey's 1920 Declaration of the Rights of African People. That is my particular takeoff. So my concern is to what extent, this conference is a sort of a continuation in order to fulfill those unfulfilled declarations of the Garvey's Declaration of Rights, which included men. He specifically mentioned men, women, and children. I thought that was particularly interesting. It was the first declaration of women's rights that I'm aware of, the first declaration of children's rights that I'm aware of. So could you give us some ideas about the philosophy and the framework of the conference?
Thank you so much. First, it was a bit loud in here. One second. Okay.
This is better. Yeah. Yes. That's what I can.
But in any case, I'm back. Good, voila. First of all, let me say it's really good to see all of you again and to have an opportunity to speak with you. It's always great to have this conversation and there we go, and to be able to share a little bit about the work of the forum. Shabaka, I hear you're in Barbados. So we'll see you tomorrow?
Of course.
Awesome. We're very happy. We're very happy to have that. So, the Permanent Forum, this is the first time that we're doing our regional consultation, led and sponsored by us in the Caribbean region. So we really wanted to do that, and we're very grateful to the government of Barbados for facilitating this for us and allowing us, first of all, to use the first 2 days of our session just to speak about what it is we're doing and to get a better, because we hardly ever have that opportunity to do that, to just sit among ourselves, the members of the forum, and to strategize about what our priorities are going to be moving forward. That's what we've been doing yesterday and today, and then in the final 2 days we'll be meeting with civil society here in the Caribbean. But during the first 2 days, I just want to say that we really wanted to look at how can we take this mandate forward? We know that the first 3 sessions of the permanent forum was really, I think, foundational building. It really was about getting the name of the permanent forum out there, getting an understanding of stakeholders about who we are and what we do and what the mandate is about. So now that we've sort of finished our first 3 sessions, we're now thinking about how can we build on that. Now it's not so much about who we are anymore, but what do we want to accomplish and how can we do that strategically with our partners. So that's what we've been talking about for the last 2 days, strategically thinking about the next 3 years. And I think it was a really good meeting, and I'm sure that will come out in time. But the next 2 days is really about understanding where we are in the Caribbean on these issues with respect to people of African descent. We know that the priority for us, and we've raised it repeatedly within the forum, the issue of reparations comes up consistently with us, but we have another major issue around, and of course that goes without saying, it's in our mandate, just looking at issues of systemic racism and what that means for particular groups of persons within society. As you all know, and I think Shabaka has been in the room with me speaking about this before, but you all know my focus has been on the rights of African women, women of African descent, women and girls in their particular situation. And I wanted to highlight that. We had a very interesting discussion just a couple of minutes ago here in Barbados about what about the men, why are you focusing on women, so forth and so on. And I gave them a little scenario saying, human rights, and it's not pie. You don't share it up and it disappears and once you've eaten it all up. Human rights are like this. When you share it up, the more people, more society are empowered and have rights, and the more you have to extend to others. So we have to continue to see human rights as that. How do we extend it to our brothers and sisters, boys and girls in the Caribbean, across the Caribbean? And that's really the work that we need to be doing. And we're hoping that in the next 2 days we can have a discussion around that. So that's for us. Reparations and systemic racism have been the priority issues for us, and we've looked at several themes linked to those. But what we really want to do in the next 2 days is to hear also from civil society in the Caribbean to say what you would want us to prioritize. So we really want to hear from you, from civil society, and to better understand what are some of the concerns. We know that I always say that the UN walls are high. And what I mean by that is that it is not easily accessible to everyone. So we talked about bringing the UN to the regions, right? Because that we know that everybody can't get the chance to come to the UNs. So how can we, as a forum, get to the regions, get to the people, get to the communities, and speak about what it is we're doing, and to hear them? And so this is a chance for us in the next 2 days, hopefully to be in listening mode, not so much talking from our side, but hearing you and seeing how we can take what you have to say and build it into some of our own thoughts so that we can ensure that we take the as we say in the Bahamas, all the boats in the harbor rise, in terms of access to rights for people of African descent. So the next two days is really about hearing from the Caribbean. What do you want? What do you see? What do you see as priorities? The discussion here tonight was, a little bit interesting on some other issues around reparations and should we have and how do we go about that. So I'm excited to hear what we're celebrating or commemorating International Human Rights Day here today at UN House. But just in the next few days, it'd be interesting to hear the discussion around that. Some of those issues that I'm mentioning came up tonight. The whole gender dimension of this discussion, men and women, and what does that mean? And the whole discussion around how do we determine, what do we really want from the whole reparations agenda? Do we need to be thinking about reframing that slightly? Do we need to be thinking about rights for different groups within the region, and not only people of African descent? So those kinds of discussions came up. But yeah, so just to say that for me, I think we have an excellent opportunity in the next few days to continue to move the process forward and to hear from you as to how we can do that better with all of you on board. You wanted to say something, Shabaka?
That we have
Yeah,
that issue.
it seems to be having a feedback problem.
Yeah, I'm hearing it from you too.
I'm going to exit and fix that. And watch it.
And while, of course, Brother Shabaka is fixing that issue, again, let me welcome you to the panel, the discussion. Professor, you're one of my favorites for sure.
Oh, thank you.
One of the things I tend to do is bring what we call the curveball, the devil's advocate. 104 years ago, there was a declaration, a Bill of Rights for the Negro world.
You are echoing. You are echoing. So
You are echoing as well. I'm wondering if Dr.
Let's try to
Gaynel is
keep the
the
question
culprit.
short. Let's keep the question short and let's let Professor answer. Because
So the challenge is coming from Professor Curry, because I'm fine now when
Okay, good
Professor
now.
Curry is muted. So I'm saying 104 years ago, there was a Negro world, as it were, Declaration of Rights by the most honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey. 104 years later, we are still grappling with the same issues. Here we are, that was a UNIA at the time, a single institution daring to be an avant-garde. Here we are 104 years later, by way of PFA, the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, addressing the same issues with regards to discrimination, especially from a systemic perspective, dealing with the whole issue of equity and equality, dealing with other issues as well, that within 104 years have not been remedied. Are there strategies that are being contemplated to deal with this issue of making declarations and making statements, as bold and as audacious as they may be from time to time, but there not being the relevant levels of follow through, levels of buy-in, even within the African community, and the levels of support needed by our respective governments? Kudos to the Bayesian government and their hosting of this forum. It's certainly signaling in the right direction. But 104 years later, it's certainly 104 years too late. How do we redeem the time, and how do we intend to learn from the lessons that were taught to us, the very tough lessons in the past century and 4 years? And be sure to unmute while responding.
Unmute. You have to unmute.
I'm trying to unmute.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. There you go. Yeah.
Thank you so much. No, and I think both you, Fergus and Kwame, you're making the exact point that I think is so relevant to us today. What is the difference about what we're doing today now with the development of the Declaration on the human rights of people of African descent, and what was happening 100 years ago with Marcus Garvey? 100 years ago, there was not this. Let me reword that. I think that much has happened. It appears that nothing has happened, but much has happened. In a sense that we now have the permanent forum. That's one step. We have a platform, a forum, and our mandate is to advocate. Our mandate is to advise. Our mandate is to provide a platform. We are providing that platform for people of African descent to come together. We have done that in the most amazing way. When we first met, we had about 300 NGOs in the room. The last time we met, our last session, we had over 1,000 NGOs represented and some 500 side events linked to the permanent forum. So we can talk about the kind of engagement that has been growing over the years. We know that there's a lot more to do, a long way to go, but we should not think that we have not done any steps. We've done some big steps. And so we are now developing this declaration on the rights of the human rights of people of African descent. We are the pen holders. this is our declaration. We have, as a forum, invited NGOs to give us their input, their ideas, their suggestions as to what they want to see. We know that governments will try to push back, but it is in our best interest to be as cohesive, comprehensive, concise, and clear about what it is we want and push for that agenda. The challenge comes in when we ourselves are not clear about what we want and we're diverse in what it is we're trying to achieve. What do we want to achieve with this declaration? And for us, as a permanent forum, we see the declaration as laying the foundation of the work that is to come. And so I see the declaration as something that is going to be evolving for the next generation of people, young Black people, who are going to really take this work forward. That's why we need to do what everything we can to ensure that it is what it is as comprehensive as we need it to be. It includes it. And this is an argument I make all the time, right? When we speak about people of African descent, we cannot see them as a homogeneous group of people. They're not. So we have to ensure that this declaration takes into account that the human rights of Blacks in Brazil and what that means to Black boys in Brazil that are being gunned down every day, the way George Floyd was gunned down. We have to think about Black people in America that are grappling, Black women and men, who are grappling with what happened recently with the election, of hearing a Black woman spoken about in the way they spoke about Kamala Harris, aside her politics aside, the way they spoke to her, the casual way in which they decided to be on a podium and speak to her in such a disparaging way was a message that you were sending to every single Black woman, not just to Kamala Harris. Not because you weren't speaking about her politics, you were speaking about her as a woman, as a Black woman. So when we set this agenda, we have to be thinking about what are we saying about what are our perceptions of Black women, right? You feel you can call her all the alphabets in the world and get away with it, and nobody speaks out. The media says nothing. You can call her a B, a C, or S, or every other letter in the alphabet and laugh about it, and people cheer about it. And so you don't do that to Hillary Clinton, who's a white woman, and you don't do that to Barack Obama, who's a Black man, but you feel comfortable enough to build on, to attack her womanhood and her Blackness together. So this declaration needs to be about understanding the specificity that we as Black women want to have recognized in that. It's about respect and dignity and so forth and so on. Yes, it's about freedom of speech, but what does that mean? And who has that freedom to do and say whatever they want? So we have to make sure that this declaration is about Black Haitians in the Dominican Republic, in the Bahamas, migrants who are trying to find a way to live, Black Haitians that are in Haiti under attack in their own country. It's about them trying, what will this declaration say to them? So I think this is a chance for us to ensure that I had the chance to be in Canada early in the year, Black Canadians who are struggling in terms of trying to bring forward their class action suit against the government for discrimination against Black people within the government administration. So it will mean different things to different people. It will mean so this declaration to me comes at a time when we as Black people, we started, I think, to feel a little bit of a push after the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Movement and the discussion and the setup of the forum and the setup of the policing mandate in the UN. And then we have to be careful not to let it fizzle away and recognize that the declaration will not be the be-all and end-all for us, but it is the beginning of what we want to see and shape for ourselves, and we have to make sure that it comes to life. I tell people it took, I think, the Indigenous group maybe more than 10 years to sort out what they wanted with their declaration. We're being asked to do it in 2 years or less than 2 years. So we have to be that much more concise because we don't have the kind of luxury to wait 10 years. And so for us, at the forum, we are going to be doing our best to ensure that the declaration, first of all, has the voices of different groups within society is reflected in that declaration. So we have civil society. It's not going to be, we hope, something that is just going to be dominated by Western leaders or by certain groups within the UN. We're really pushing to ensure that this is something that we can have some sort of influence over, and that the voices represented there will be the voices of Africans and people of African descent the world over, different groups of people with their different realities coming to the table and being recognized, and having a declaration that will promote their rights and their lives, and protect their livelihoods and take them and their families to the next level. That's what we're hoping for. We're not expecting it to just land in our laps. We know we have to fight for it, but we have come a long way, Kwame. We have. When I was in the UN 24 years ago, 20, maybe 26 years ago, I joined the UN. The word reparations could not be spoken. I remember, having these discussions and trying to say that, the statements by the High Commissioner back then just were not real to us. How can you have a statement about equality when you don't address issues of racial discrimination? When you ignore us, when you don't take the time to get to know us, when you come in and make blanket statements about Black people, and when you say to me, okay, you're an African, I say, yes, I am, but not really. I'm also a woman from the Caribbean. And so you must understand my reality. And so pushing that, now I hear the High Commissioner, the Secretary General, these people are talking about issues that 20 years ago, they were not talking about. 20 years ago, we couldn't get them to speak about these issues from their podiums. They fought against it vehemently. They did not fund the anti-racial discrimination agenda within the UN. They didn't. They absolutely didn't. I was overseeing that agenda, that mandate in New York, and I will tell you, as a chief of that division dealing with global issues, I had zero allocation in my budget for people of African descent. I mean zero. And I had equally, and notice, I think that, as I said, no discredit to LGBTQI persons, but that budget was so big. And I had to think, how can I use some of that budget to address some issues around racism and racial discrimination? And I did get to use some of it looking at LGBTQI persons in the Caribbean and some of their human rights concerns. But having to be very creative in how I use the budget, because I have no budget to work on racial discrimination. And if you don't fund me, I am not important to you. What's important to you, you ensure that you fund. So we have to make sure over the next while, as we're negotiating this declaration, we recognize how far we've come, and keep in mind how much further we want to go. We need to be clear on what we want. We want clear recommendations coming from civil society to say about what you want in there. So don't just give us generalization, but clearly what you want, and then we try to see how we can get it in there. It's going to happen. It's not if, it's when. It's going to happen.
We're grateful for the confidence, and we're getting instructions to close this session. I'm sure we all have questions for you. We would like to know if there's an attempt for action. So certainly we want to have you back in January, shortly after we reconvene the Indaba program very early next year. We are hoping that we will have you to give us an update, and also the outcomes of the ongoing conference in Barbados. Thank you so very much for joining us and sharing a little bit, because our appetite is just whetted for more, but we understand that you are very busy this evening. So thank you so much. We look forward to having you again. Bye-bye. Yes, so the Three Musketeers are back. We are back to continue the discussion, of course, first of all, because I think one of the things Gavi pointed out, I know we can't we can't be stuck on Gavi, but as a historian, I like to look back in order to go forward. Absolutely. And the Sankofa principle as well. You're looking back, but keeping an eye in front.
You don't need
They're
the
keeping an eye in
preamble,
front.
Let's start.
But you know, Gavi did not trust the League of Nations, and the UN succeeded the League of Nations. And from what Professor Gaynel said, you know, up to 20 years ago, you still couldn't trust them. Absolutely, you know, because they weren't prepared to address some of the fundamentals. And we know that the UN was very much behind the tragedy in Haiti following the 2010 disaster there. That part of the problems confronting Haiti were partly engineered, orchestrated, or facilitated by the United Nations. And Gavi made the point, United Nations is not our friend when it comes to liberty, to freedom. You know, it's good to know that we have come some way, quite some way. I can't even say a long way, but we have come some way. We have made some progress. And the UN perhaps a little bit more open, but we know the structure of the UN and the power wielded by the few, you know, in the United Nations when it comes to critical issues that affect their interest. So, you know, we must be mindful of that. But we are glad that there's a positive vibe coming from this conference. So, Shabaka, you didn't have the opportunity to join the introductory session in Barbados this evening. So tell us what you might have told them this evening, what you're looking forward to, and what you're doing in Barbados exactly.
First, let me speak to the issue at hand. And let me say that what Dr. Gaynel Curry is speaking to there is a transformation in global consciousness, which we have been at the center of. Our struggle has been at the center of changing that consciousness. You know, we often tell our students, Dr. Fergus, that the one of the contributions that African people have made to the Caribbean that is so under-recognized is humanizing the societies in which we live. We are the ones who broke down the worst elements of colonialism and started to humanize our societies. And you know, and unfortunately, and you see it when you ask students or even teachers to name some of our heroes, and they talk about politicians and athletes, and they don't recognize those people who sacrificed their lives to humanize, which is really our greatest contribution, not just to the Caribbean, but to the world. And so that contribution continues. And so to frame the conversation as kind of us versus the UN, I would prefer to reframe it as our message finally reaching a wider audience. When we talk, and now I'm talking about the General Assembly. I understand, you know, what's happening with the Security Council, and I see that as a different element entirely. The two things kind of masquerade under one umbrella, but you're talking about two different things. And what has happened, I think, and I think this is something that I don't think our leaders in the Caribbean clearly recognized while it was happening. Maybe some of them still don't understand the importance of it. But that rebellion that took place in the wake of George Floyd's, public murder on the streets of the United States of America at the hands of Derek Chauvin, that white supremacist police officer, or that police officer imbued with elements of white supremacy, that murder sparked a global reckoning with these kinds of questions, and it made people turn and look at the things we were saying and take cognizance, take note of it, take note of the work that we were doing around reparations and everything else. And it really significantly changed the international discourse. What we're living in right now is an attempt by the powers that be to reverse the gains that we have made since that time. You know, so we're actually in the period of the backlash. And of course, as a historian, Dr. Fergus, I'm sure you have taught your students. I haven't been in this particular class, but I'm sure you've been in that class where you've explained to students that there's no linear development in history. Things happen to, you have ups, rises, and valleys and mountains. You have things go in one direction one day and then they go in the next. And so I think that we are in that period now where you're seeing the powers that be in the West in particular reacting to the kinds of gains that we have made. I know we're not talking much about, we're not celebrating those gains, but we made significant gains in my opinion, in the last few years, internationally, in terms of recognition for our struggle. Now, just to put this into
Shabaka,
perspective.
just add this dimension to it, where you mentioned it seems to be as if there's credit going to the United Nations, that platform that we have had. But isn't it more so a victory of social media, victory of activism on social media that has been responsible for that global consciousness in terms of the struggle against racism and so on? Isn't it that civil society activists, social media activists in particular, are the ones that are pushing this consciousness, and not so much the international platform we have on the United Nations? Speak to that.
Well, I think you're right. I think what has happened is that the activism has changed the climate. I was there in a UN meeting, 3 or 4 years ago, and I happened to be in a space with some very senior people who were having the conversation on reparations, and they said exactly what Gaynel Curry was saying tonight. That up until, let's say, 7 years ago, they just could not raise the question of reparations, and now reparations is right there front and center in all the conversations. What you have, as I say, happening right now is an attempt by the traditional white settler colonial powers to reverse the conversation, to move things backwards from where they've arrived at this particular moment. It's a very, very interesting time that we're living in. I also want to say, I don't want to give too much credit. Of course, social media plays a role. But remember, we've been doing this thing long before we had the internet, before social media. Garvey was able to organize 10 million strong all around the world and so on. I think it's the historic conditions at the moment are also a factor. And so the kind of outrageous forms of police brutality, the abuse of police powers in particular, that we saw taking place across the Western world, in the United States in particular, but even on the continent of Africa and in the Caribbean, I think was central to propelling people out into the streets. And of course, with that came the removal of the end to the open glorification of the people who were responsible for creating the unjust, hierarchical, an unequal system that we live in today. That was part and parcel of.
We just missed the opportunity to say goodnight to our 91.1 listeners. That's unfortunate because it's our last program for the year. So, Ruskin, we apologize for that. And we hope to see them again, of course, next year. Early in January, middle of January, we are going to resume live the Indaba program. So thank you all for listening on 91.1 FM. And if you're still listening to this station, a pleasant good night.
Yeah, I think one of the other things
Yes,
that Ms. Curry raised, which I think might be challenging for some of our listeners, was her own emphasis on dealing with women's issues. I think that it is important for us to recognize that within our universal struggle, people have different specialties, different areas of emphasis, different things that they will become experts in, and they will bring that expertise to the grand collective table. And I think it's important for us to recognize that. So, for example, yourself, Dr. Fergus, as the chair of the Reparations Committee, and as a historian, you would bring those kinds of the things that come with that to the table. Ms. Curry, she's interested, and her work has been around the question of rights for women and girls, and of course, within that struggle for African people, there are many different intersections, and inside those intersections, you have people gaining expertise in many different areas, and we have to be able to, to celebrate each person's contribution to the whole. And of course, the whole, of course, is to not just advance our people, but to advance humanity one step further.
I have a question for you, if I can. And this question has to do with two responses that I see happening. On the one hand, there is a far-right pushback to eliminate any talk about reparations at all, and to see it as quite offensive. I hear talks about wanting to give whites reparations by way of some Trumpian camp potential administrators. But on the other hand, on the left side, there is an accusation. It's controversial, but an accusation nonetheless. And the accusation is that on the left, there is a reshaping of what reparations means. And there's a watering down, and there's a kind of a liberalization of what it means to be operating within reparatory justice. Um, and so, on the one hand, you have an ignoring, you have a combative stance, you have an attempt to erase. But on the other hand, the accusation is that the left is seeking to infiltrate. And what Marcus Messiah Garvey and others wanted was self-determination. What they wanted was black nationalism. What they wanted was to have the kind of gains that nobody could take away, because it was founded on things much more sure and secure than something that one executive order can destroy with the stroke of a pen. And so we are hearing lots of talk about reparations, but what reparations means is something very, very different in a 21st century context in a lot of liberal camps to that which was being discussed in the early 20th century by Marcus Messiah Garvey. Is that an observation of yours? Question number one. And question number two is, how do we combat that? If it is indeed true, a fierce resistance on the one hand and then infiltration potential on the other hand.
My brother, Kwame Kamau, I love, these provocative questions. These are the kinds of things that make for a good radio show, these are the kinds of things that people are going to want to hear the answer to. So first of all, let me say that you are absolutely clear about the right. We are in that period, as I said, of a backlash to the gains that we've made recently. And so there's an attempt to remove books that speak to our issues from the bookshelves, to remove professors that speak to our issues from universities, to marginalize the work of historians and sociologists, and in fact, to villainize them as individuals and so on, coming from certain sectors. And of course, all of that is riding on top of neo-Nazi, far-right movement that is gaining, the political center stage, all across, gaining more and more power and position.
Amplification,
across, they're amplifying across the Western Europe and North America. So you're very clear about what's happening on the right. When you speak about the left,
well, for a while, I thought Kwame had some inside information into what was transpiring at the moment until he mentioned Marcus Garvey. But yes, that same dynamic is happening even now, where the elements, call them right, call them conservative, call them counter-revolutionary, whatever, I suspect they have already infiltrated, some of them infiltrated the reparations movement in some degree. And the narrative has been challenged. I wouldn't say changed yet, but there is the introduction of changed narrative. So the narrative has been challenged, but the official narrative hasn't changed yet. But I would not be shocked if there is some kind of accommodation, some shift that usually would take place when that kind of infiltration and pressure takes place. But that is left to be seen. I don't want to say too much now on that because these things are currently being discussed at certain levels. But yes, that infiltration always happens so long as you have a Black or African revolutionary movement. We saw it with the Black Panthers, the civil rights movement. We saw it anti-apartheid movement. We saw it wherever there is a radical, progressive, revolutionary African Black movement. There will be infiltration. Normally, often they take out the leaders. We have seen that over and over again. They take out the leaders, violently through assassinations, or they co-opt certain pliant leaders within the movement, in order to assist in changing the narrative and changing the direction in which the movement is going, in order to soften up the objectives, and so on, to make it more sort of palatable to that counter-revolutionary force. So it's not surprising. It happened as part of the revolution. I think it was Karl Marx who said that every revolution has a counter-revolutionary force. So you've got to understand that once you are pushing a revolutionary direction, people are going to push back in a counter-revolutionary direction as well. So what gives? Who knows, right? But we are always positive that we are going to be the victorious ones.
Yeah, I just want to I think Dr. Fergus has elaborated there on what's happening from the right. I just want to address Kwame's concerns about the left, and of course, in his question he used a number of different terms, to describe what he thinks is happening from the left. But let me say that the left has traditionally, throughout most of the 20th century, disparaged the struggle for African people's rights as identity politics, and and so what is happening right now, again, as the left tries, again to reassert itself internationally, you have two different forces on the left. You have a group that would trace its lineage back to Hugo Chavez and Evo Morales in the 1990s, who are speaking about socialism for the 21st century. And that version of the left, sees the incorporation of Native American and African struggle, and the struggle of women and so on, as absolute central pillars of a struggle for a new world. A new world is possible through, challenging the injustices, or the hierarchies, as they might be called, of the West as a civilizational entity. But you still have a traditional 20th century left that sees, the struggle for equal rights for and justice for women, and for other marginalized groups, and in particular for African people, as something that is a threat to the workers' movement, or to the real struggle, whatever scientific analysis that they have come up with. They think that this is not an asset but a liability, and so the left is somewhere between those two poles on the work that we have been coming out of our own tradition of struggle. Where we have arrived, there's that polarization on the left. The right is pretty clear. What we are doing is counterproductive, and there are a number of different ways that it needs to be crushed, and a number of different angles from which they're coming from to crush it. But the left also, as I said, it has traditionally had taken a militantly antithetical position to the work that we've been doing, that 20th century version of the left. But as I said, there's a new left now, and it describes itself as a new left, and it is doing its utmost best to try to incorporate all the struggles that of marginalized people. Of course, the right, one of the claims that the right makes is that people like us get our inspiration from the left, from the traditional left, without recognizing the long tradition of struggle that we have that predates the 20th century entirely. That has always been willing to accommodate new ideas wherever they come from, that could advance our struggle. And of course, ultimately, our struggle is a struggle to advance, according to Frantz Fanon, to advance humanity, not just to liberate ourselves from the kinds of shackles that have been imposed on us, but to advance humanity itself one step further.
I have a teasing question, and we're coming down to the end, but this is our last hurrah, so we are asking technical staff to bear with us. There was definitely a nationalist thrust to Garvey. There was a kind of do for self-determination, and it was radical, it was progressive, and it really didn't take any prisoners, so to speak. The closest thing that we can see to that is what's happening out of the Sahelian region, which Dr. Fergus is going to treat with very extensively when we return in early 2025. So for those of you who are listening, please stay tuned for that. It seems as if sometimes the democratic process gets in the way of what needs to happen in African spaces and African descended spaces because of how it functions in partnership with capitalism and big money. That when you have big money, when you have a certain amount of buying power, you can whip up the votes. You can buy votes. Certainly, the media plays an exceptionally important role. But where we see, when we look very critically at development in an African continental context, what we see happening in terms of the brightest stars, in terms of the greatest development, the sharpest ascendancies, as it were, to anything akin to real and tangible progress for the people on the ground, it was not through the traditional democratic means, but it was through juntas who took power by way, of course, of force, by way of arms. Thankfully, bloodless coups, but coups nonetheless, anti-democratic in a sense, but still being for the people, not by way of the vote, and not by the bullet either, but by way of a recognition, Thomas Sankara style, that this system is getting in the way. So we need to set up a temporary movement to put things within its right context and framework, serve them, bring them up to a level where they have what they need and can properly function before returning to this European experiment of what we call democracy. Do you believe, question coming out of that, do you believe that the democratic process and capitalism, especially within the 21st century context, is standing in the way of African progress, whether on the continent or in the diaspora, in light of the bright shining star that we see into the Sahelian region? Does that give hope for a new kind of politics, a new kind of economics, again, where we can dare to reinvent the wheel, and forge, again, through self-determination, means and motives and methodologies that serve African interests better than what has hitherto transpired?
I think the evidence, Kwame, might suggest that your hypothesis is faulty. The premise on which you are making that sort of claim, because the military juntas that you talk about are very few. They're very few. We have two occurring in Burkina Faso from the 1980s back now in the 21st century. But the military, you see, the fortunate thing about Africa, unlike most of the Caribbean, is you have had both systems. You have had military governance and you have had civil governance. So you have something to compare. Some of the worst instances of governance have been the military. So while you have these progressive regimes in Burkina Faso and Niger, you also had some of the worst cases, reversal of developments, which was very solid. Take Nigeria, for example, until the Civil War, 1966. Nigeria was a model of development. The Nigerians will tell you that they were way ahead of places like Singapore. that their medical institutions were so well advanced and of such a high standard. Saudi Arabian princes used to go to the University of Ibadan, the medical school there. Now the reverse is happening, where, anybody with money goes out of Nigeria for medical attention. The military was the foundation of the corrupt or the kleptocracy that you have in Nigeria today. It's the military that upset the whole system. So while you have this positive thing, it's the military that got rid of a very progressive first president of Ghana. We know the CIA was behind it, but the military, several attempts by the military, and then the military takeovers didn't go down too well until Jerry Rawlings came, and the best part of his governance was when he became civilian president. You see, so the military, I cannot agree with that, because all over Africa you have had, well, most of Africa have experienced military regimes, and very few of them can really claim to have had any progressive development. Very, very few. So
I can see that from a historic perspective, and to be clear, I never wanted what I said to be applied to history. I'm looking at the current contemporary context of what progressive minds, and I use the Thomas Sankara context in terms of what conscious progressive minds that I'm talking about, using militarism as the platform, but applying an Ubuntu framework, an Ubuntu mindset, a conscious national in one context, but in this case, they're expanding towards a regional context, and they're competing really against ECOWAS. And so, as we are looking at it in the contemporary context,
if you look at the Sudan, is the military causing all the havoc in the Sudan and making it almost impossible, for any development to take place. It's military regimes there. So
is the difference then, therefore, the consciousness behind the military is what I'm making?
You don't have, this is a rare situation you have, spurred on mainly by Mali, which has had a tradition of progressive elements within governance, whether it's military or civilian. Remember Keita from the very beginning, that was an associate of Kwame Nkrumah, and would have formed, they were the core of what should have been, a pan-African continental movement. They were willing to forego their own, presidency within their own state in order to have a grand president of a particular region. They were willing to do make that kind of sacrifice. But that's Mali, Burkina Faso. From the 80s, you cannot put history aside. From the 80s, they have had that tradition, right? And interrupted from time to time, but that element was there because Traore consciously tries to model his governance on Sankara. So you cannot really separate the history from the current situation that you have. You can't, So yes, you have a point in that democracy might be a humbug in many instances, not just at times, but military regime is not the answer. Even though some military juntas might be able to confront the inadequacies of democracy, but it is most military regimes, because of the autocracy that is natural to such regimes, you have corruption becoming endemic. There's not many men like Traore that you can find, with that kind of power and not abuse it. It's not many men.
Yeah, and that's why I would like to add, Dr. Fergus, to what you're saying there, to say that working within the military context is just unsustainable. You have to develop, robust institutions for society to be able to continue along progressive lines. Let me address the other underlying conversation here, which is the question of nationalism. And I think we have to differentiate between white nationalism and black nationalism. And here, I'm going to extend the term black to cover all peoples who have been, who are non-white. all black nationalisms forms were set up and organized to facilitate or in order to promote some form of liberation. White nationalism is set up to oppress and to suppress other people. That's so one is formed. They're formed in two different cauldrons, in two different kinds of fire, and therefore we have to look at them differently. And sometimes, even within our own context, we tend to look at black nationalism as a kind of map that falls on top of white nationalism. And Garvey, for me, is an interesting figure. You know, when we celebrate him, of course, the Right Honorable Marcus Garvey needs to be celebrated in our community. But we must look at Garvey's nationalism, his African nationalism, his black nationalism, in the context of the time in which Garvey was speaking. We're talking about a time in which people who look like me and you were earmarked for extinction. And I don't have time to go into all the details, but all of us here who are sitting here tonight should be well aware of what was happening with pseudoscientific racism and kind of conclusions that the scientific Western world had come to about our inferiority and about what that inferiority meant for us surviving in the long term. And some in the West had decided that it was important, it would be a good thing for them to aid us in becoming extinct as an inferior group so that humanity could progress without us. And not just us, but other people of color as well. And so, but of course, we were the ultimate other. But the point I'm trying to make here now is that, so when we think in terms of black nationalism, and you raise Thomas Sankara as a kind of representative, Thomas Sankara has a famous quote where he says he hopes his life will serve, the only thing he hopes from his life is that it will serve as an example to advance humanity, something to that effect. Yes, you could look that up quickly and get the exact quote. But he says one of his most famous quotes is that he wants to be remembered. How he wants to be remembered is as contributing to the advance of humanity. That's one of his most famous statements. And so our nationalism has always been, yes, about transforming our condition as a people, but it has also, because it has come from the point of view of a liberating thing, it's a liberating force, it has always been concerned with humanity and transforming the world in general, in making the world over.
That's the Ubuntu philosophy. That's the Ubuntu philosophy.
Using your own language.
Philosophy. Yeah, I think we need to close. We need to close. We have to take cognizance of Renee's situation. We need to close. So, as usual, Reverend Kwame, could you look at the comments and take us out?
Sure. Well, before I do, I want to thank. I just want to thank our special guests on tonight, Kadija Dyer from the Emancipation Support Committee, doing a fine job in terms of advising us with regards to what's happening this coming Saturday and Sunday. There's a word that we want to get in from Shabaka before I continue. Go right ahead, Shabaka.
Sorry to interrupt you, brother, but Dr. Fergus, there's something I have to share before we close the end of the year. It has come to my attention that someone you know very well, a member of the Reparations Committee and a member of the Government Committee on Monuments, is going around soliciting, assistance in different places, civil society spaces, for people to vote to maintain monuments to Christopher Columbus. There is an individual that we know very well, and I've got this from good and credible sources, which is why I feel it is important to announce it tonight. I'm going to come back in the new year with the details, and I'm going to call names. We're not afraid to call names.
I think you should leave that until you perhaps ready to bring the information. I think it might be bad to drop that. I think it might be bad to drop that allegation, whether you have evidence or not, in this last session, in the last minute of this last session. So
hold on. Something we have to watch out for, because we're going to be
nobody can respond to it now, Shabaka. So I think you better suspend that for now.
All right, I leave it there.
We lean on the wisdom of the elder with regards to the
It's not going
process.
anywhere, so better leave it there until we resume next year.
Definitely something to discuss. The pros and cons of historic, what we would refer to as iconography and its
Yeah, that
maintenance
is what I didn't
versus
want. So
that of its
another
erasure. A
conversation.
conversation,
Let's leave
certainly,
that there
Rastafari would say a
and
true conversation for another day.
yeah.
So we again, as we close on tonight, we want to thank Kadija Dyer from the Emancipation Support Committee staff for being here to talk about, of course, the Kwanzaa market taking place at Queen's Hall this coming Saturday and this coming Sunday. They will have the typical, of course, wares as it relates to this end of year season. Your black cake, your punch de creme, your sweet bread, your various other local confectionaries, so to speak, but they will also have things in relation to African decor for your home and even accessories and wardrobe for your person, also featured at this very fantastic market, very, very highly anticipated by women within our community and even outside of our community as well, because of the ambiance of Queen's Hall. It really lends itself to elegant, wonderful, safe shopping. And I ask that you go and shop until you drop this coming Saturday and Sunday. If you need more information, please call the Emancipation Support Committee number. You can Google them, and I'm sure they will cater to you. By way of course, our African report on tonight, we learned about, of course, the second term return of that of His Excellency President elect, yet to be installed, of course, John. And so, with regards to the process, we want to thank Dr. Fergus not only for a very dynamic breakdown of that electoral process, showing the strengthening of electioneering and election management in Ghana, such that it is free and fair and seemingly free from fair. So that is a big nod and something to be encouraged. We also saw, by way of his program, a woman-led institution that allowed for almost, by way of a promise, a 24-hour turnaround in terms of the results. By way of the program, we also saw as well the magnanimous concession of defeat long before the final tallies were brought in, and it's showing, at least in the area of Ghana, that they are willing to engage a democratic process. Democracy has its challenges, it has its pitfalls, it has its shortcomings, but Ghana certainly seems in West Africa to be the kind of model that others, if they want to get elections right, it seems as if they seem to be offering a solution and offering a model, an example in that regard. So we tip our hat to them. And again, of course, to Dr. Fergus for yet another fantastic breakdown of an African issue, providing those insights and those very important quotes and song bites that really take us home in fine style. You've done a marvelous job for 2024. We look forward to seeing what you will do in 2025. We had, by way of Professor Gaynel Curry, a PFAD member, that is the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, a very special guest joining us for the first, as it were, PFAD Caribbean Regional Conference, dealing with the issue of the UN draft of human rights dealing with people of African descent. We have our esteemed Queen Mother, Azekia Ozuma Wadada, in Barbados for this conference. We also have, of course, Professor Gaynel Curry, who only minutes before did a closing remark, closing statements at the official conference welcome. We also have in Barbados, representing us very ably, I'm sure, our brother, our comrade, a young phenom in Pan-Africanism and activism, brother Shabaka Kambon. He's going to be there to weigh in on the issues. Really looking forward to hearing from them in January, both himself and the participants there. What were the outcomes? What were the major issues? What were the highlights of the conference? We look forward to that. 104 years later, after what Marcus Garvey had tabled, how would we ensure that this draft declaration, which is going to eventually become a draft, hopefully, is not going to suffer the same kind of fate where it does not live up to what it was supposed to because of a lack of buy-in by we ourselves. Beyond the institutions, the African people, we need to own it. And what are we going to do this time around? That's a very important question. Of course, we went into a number of other issues, but to weigh in terms of those in the comment section, my wife is actually bidding us a very pleasant good night on tonight. Again, pleasant good night. She's saying to the Indaba hosts, guests, and listeners, always a pleasure to be here. As per the usual, thought-provoking questions and discourse. We have, of course, coming out of St. Lucia, he would prefer to say Ianola, Bongo Wisely, bidding, of course, Grand Rising. Grand Rising is a Rastafari thing. It's a conscious thing. It has nothing to do with the time of day. It's the rising of the consciousness from that of chaos into the order that is Ma'at and Ubuntu. So Grand Rising to you as well. Bongo Wisely is the chairman of the Caribbean Rastafari organization. We have Ola BC, the Griot, saying, can an inter-school competition be developed to widen the knowledge? And that is in reference, of course, to the Emancipation Support Committee spoken word competition, as well as its history quiz. Definitely an inter-school competition can indeed play such a role. Perhaps you might want to give some ideas and suggestions, and perhaps maybe even participate in seeing that it is so. So thank you for the comment. Out of Bahamas, we have Jamiki saying, Baraka, blessed down setting royal family, Rastafari brethren out of the Bahamas. Very thought-provoking activist. And again, glad to have you on tonight. And if we have one comment, it would be from this sister. Always the first to be here, always the first to comment. That is no less a person than Sister Deborah E. Walters, bidding greetings to the Indaba family out of Connecticut in the US of A. I want to thank my co-host for another fantastic, dynamic, and scintillating session on tonight. Lots of thought-provoking discussion. Of course, it's our grand finale. If you love what we do, please smash the like button, leave a comment, a positive one, hopefully, and be sure to share this far and wide with your friends and family. But for now, we're not out of love. We're not out of faith, we're not out of words, and we're certainly out of Pan-Africanism and activism. But for now, we are absolutely out of time. Again, thanking Renee Francois for the fantastic job that she does behind the scenes, as well as the leadership of, again, Zakia Uzuma Wadada in the area of producing what we are able as the Three Musketeers to do here every Wednesday night from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. By way of 91.1 FM, by way of ESC YouTube, and by way of CPAN on Facebook. Until the next time, on behalf of both of my co-hosts, I want to say a very pleasant good night. Season's greetings to every one of you, regardless as to what season you're celebrating. Hopefully in that there will be a celebration of Kwanzaa in there. And again, we look forward to seeing you in January of 2025. A royal salute.